Welcome back to the DASYLab training. This training will make the most sense if you have watched the previous modules.
DASYLab Basics Module 5 is going to focus on visualizing the data and making the displays look nice to be used as operator panels or as reports. So we're going to focus on visualization. I'll review the DASYLab views, then we'll look at layouts. And new in DASYLab 2020, but not covered exhaustively in this class, we have multiple monitor support. There are three ways in DASYLab to view display modules: the worksheet view, the display window view, the layout, which was originally called the VI tool, and the layouts only display the graphical components, and in general it's the preferred method to display to the end user. On the DASYLab toolbar is a shortcut to be able to switch between the four views that DASYLab has: control sequencer, display, worksheet view, and then the layout view.
Let's start by reviewing the current display capabilities of DASYLab. First, in the worksheet view, I've opened the FFT worksheet that I worked on in Module 4. It has 3 chart displays and 1 digital meter display. They can be anywhere on the screen. They can be anywhere on any monitor on your computer. They can be full screen. They can overlap if you want to do that. They can be all crowded. They can get small. Now, one thing that they all have in common is the Windows title bar is always going to be present. So if I make this YT chart as small as possible, I take it down in effect to minimized icon size. That's not very useful. As I start to make it larger, you can see that DASYLab has done its best to show you as much information as possible, and it has removed the X and Y axis. As it gets bigger, it puts them back. So one of the things that you can do to control that is to manage the information that's on this screen. You can go to the display window and say that you don't want to see the function bar. You can go to the display window and say you don't want to see the menu. I can right-click and get back to that menu again, and those are the only things that it lets me remove. It doesn't let me, oh, it does. If you go to the window menu now, you can do only curves, and now you have a minimalist DASYLab display that you can size down. So you can see it can get pretty small. Now that's not always very useful. People like having the axes. Note that you can right-click and get back to the menus, but having the menus is still convenient. And I'm so used to having the function bar there, I'm going to put it back. So what you found is some substantial portion of the space available in this window is dedicated to Windows itself, the title bar, the X button, the minimize, restore button, as well as menus and features like the function bar. You can rearrange these anywhere you want on the screen, but there's no way to lock them into place. You can't say, I want this not to be able to move. The next time you come to it, operators do this, you can jostle it. You can make it move around. You also don't have a lot of flexibility on making it an exact size, arranging it in a specific position on the screen. You can work on it, but you end up doing a lot of things. Now you note that digital meter was underneath the YT chart. Now I move the YT chart, or the digital meter was on top, and now it's underneath. So let's move the digital meter up. So generally DASYLab wants stuff to be tiled in this view or arranged in some way, so that you don't have one on top of the other. That ends up being a design decision on your part as well. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. It doesn't affect the performance at all. If you like working in this view and you want to be able to remember the locations of windows, we do offer you in the View menu the ability to save a window arrangement. So if you click on Save Window Arrangement, you get a choice of 8, and you can name each one. So this is Displays. I'll call it All Displays. And when you click OK, I want you to look up here at this drop-down on the Windows function bar, and it just has a dash in it right now. When I click OK now, it now has the name that we just created. And when you click on this drop-down, you can see that there's a shortcut, Alt 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 other unnamed views. So this is a shortcut to the same thing that you can do in the View menu by selecting a window arrangement. And specifically, when you select it in the View menu, it will bring you over to this display selector. Now, I'm going to change this so that I have just the FFT information on my screen, and I want it to stay inside the DASYLab window. And I can go to the View menu again, and I can do Save a Window Arrangement, and this time number 2, and this one can be FFTs. And then finally, I'm going to minimize everything. I'm going to hide everything. And then I'm going to go to the View menu, and I'm going to say Save Window Arrangement, Worksheet Only. So now I've got 3 Windows arrangements. I can easily move between them. I can click on the drop-down. Oh, I just overwrote number 2. All right, so I'll go back to All Displays. I will minimize and restore. I wanted an FFT one. View, Save Window Arrangement, number 3. We're going to call this FFTs. And click OK. So now I have All Displays, Worksheet Only, and FFTs. One of the things you can do in all versions of DASYLab, but notably in DASYLab Lite and Basic, you can go to the Options menu, go to Global Settings, and under Start Stop Worksheet, you can say Switch to Display when the measurement starts. You can also switch to Layout 1 when the measurement starts. What does that mean? So let's look at the display view. View, Windows, Display. The display view in DASYLab, let's hide everything, gives you, by default, the information panel at the bottom of the screen, and it gives you a tree diagram view of the worksheet, where you can see a list of all the modules that are installed on this worksheet. If you have any layouts, it would list layout windows, and it also is another location where you can get to some global information. If you want to use this as a backdrop, you can right-click and go to Display Settings and say that you want to display a bitmap. I'm going to do Stretched. I'm going to select a bitmap, and I'm going to select the DASYLab logo because that's one of the bitmaps that oh no, let's do a better one. There's some additional files in the DASYLab folder. I'm going to select the dam as my backdrop. I want it stretched to fit. Click OK. Now I have a dam in the background. When I restore Windows, so if I go to All Displays, that backdrop will be there. One of the things that I've seen some customers do is you've made the DASYLab window relatively small. I'm going to turn off the information area. And I'm going to do relatively small, but I still like having this drop down. So now the DASYLab window can take up less space on the screen or be behind everything. So this is a mode that allows you to use the worksheet display windows without displaying the worksheet logic to your operator. This has a lot of limitations, and some of the limitations I mentioned. You're limited with how small things can get. When you get small, you're taking up half the space of the window with window dressing. So with the Windows title bar and the Windows frame. We created the layout view to give you a way to control how your display looks in a fixed format that you design. So you're going to create, in effect, an operator panel or an HMI that your end user or you will be able to use as the operator panel, the display panel, or even as a report. So that will be the next thing to talk about.
DASYLab's layout view is accessed from the Window menu or by clicking on the Layout shortcut button. The layout view is an operator panel or a report panel. DASYLab Pro and Full allow for up to 200 layouts per worksheet. DASYLab Lite and Basic have 1 layout per worksheet. Layouts can be configured for full screen at project startup. With DASYLab 2020, you also have the ability to display layouts on more than one monitor and to control which monitor a layout is displayed on. As you can see in this image, the layout consists of fixed elements like text, objects like circles, lines, and rectangles, as well as dynamic information, including the date and time and any display windows that you have on your work area, so that you can display the same information without the windows dressing, just with the graphical information of the display window. When you first create the layout, it creates a new toolbar that in previous versions of DASYLab were floating. In DASYLab 2020 Service Pack 1 and on, it will be pre-docked on your screen, so you may have to look for it. I made some layout examples just to give you an idea of some of the things that you can do with layouts. Ignore the fact that these say DASYLab 13 because I created them with DASYLab 13, but they continue to run well with DASYLab 2020. This is a layout that includes some bitmaps. The measurement computing and the DASYLab 13 are bitmaps that I created, a buttonized or a beveled edge. And then I have just a gray bitmap, a gray rectangle bitmap that also has a beveled edge to give this a feeling of 3D. The YT chart is displayed on top of it, as is the digital meter. Same example, slightly different. Instead of being several beveled boxes, it's one large beveled box, and everything else is flat on top of it. So the idea here is to tell you that you're not locked into what DASYLab gives you, that you can add your own graphical elements, including your own company logo, or even images of the device under test or of the test stand that you may want to point out information in. This is the more classic DASYLab layout where I have these same bitmaps, so the DASYLab 13 and the measurement computing bitmaps, but the rest of this is all DASYLab. This is a digital meter with a slightly depressed look, a YT chart, on second YT chart. I have a table object here. These were for examples that are posted up on the web for measurement computing users, and so I put instructions in the layout to give people the keyboard shortcuts so you don't have to have the menus open while you're working with this. I also gave some quick instructions on how to work with the YT chart in the layout, and of course my ubiquitous digital meter at the bottom. For convenience, and again because this was an example that I did For end users who may be new to DASYLab, I included at the bottom of the screen a text line that has the name of the data file in it. This is a different layout example that wasn't actually running when I took the snapshot of it, but it has 2 slider modules as well as a bunch of digital meter modules and a start-stop. So the layout is not constrained to just display objects, but any object that creates a separate display window, like the switch module or the slider module, can be included on a layout. So just to repeat what I said, 200 screens or reports in DASYLab Full or Pro. In DASYLab Lite or Basic, we limit you to 1. You can switch between layouts based on data or user events. If you have DASYLab Lite or Basic, the only way you can switch between layouts is manually or with the user key event. And that's pretty much to go into the layout or to come out of the layout because you only have the 1. You can include graphics, text controls, and displays on a single layout. You can customize the colors, fonts, and the 3D appearance. And in DASYLab 2020, we support multiple monitors. So if you are working with DASYLab 2016 or earlier, you won't have the multiple monitor feature. So the example we're going to work with is using the FFT.DSB that we were just looking at. And we're going to create a new layout. We'll use the layout toolbar and link in all the display windows. So I'm going to put the YT chart and the digital meter on the layout.
So I'll go to the window menu and click on New Layout. DASYLab now changes its screen to be a virtual piece of paper. I'm going to make this full screen so that you can see what it looks like. So the new layout is this white screen with a black background to show you the extent of the screen. The first thing I want to do is go into the layout page setup. I right-clicked to open the context menu and I'll click layout page setup. I'm going to name this. This is going to be my displays. It's screen oriented. You've got several orientations to choose from. You've got US letter, 8.5 by 11, and you've got the European DIN formats, A3, A4, A5, and A6. A3 is comparable to our 11 by 17 ledger. A4 is similar to 8.5 by 11. A5 is half of 8.5 by 11, and A6 is half of that again. So you can see that there are some monitor settings here that I've got a default monitor. 0 means the monitor that DASYLab is on, and this computer that I'm working on has 3 monitors active at the moment. This is a 1 monitor example, so I'm not going to make any changes to the monitor settings. What I do want to do is change the color, the background color of this page. And the word page under colors gives me a place where I can change background colors. And I'm going to go to the lighter of the 2 grays, click OK, and click OK again. So now I've got a gray page instead of a bright white page. And I will use this to drop objects on and create the operator panel that I want. The DASYLab object toolbar for the layout window is docked to the left of the screen. In earlier versions, it appeared undocked and floated around, but in the release that I'm working with right now, it docks. If I can get it to dock again, there we go. It docks on the left by default. That's so that you can find it. It doesn't have to be here. If you would prefer it, for example, to be at the top of the screen, you can put it up at the top of the screen. So this is my opportunity to tell you that all the DASYLab toolbars have the ability to be undocked and moved around. So if you don't like where they are, you can put them somewhere else. You can put them up on the side of the screen if you would prefer that. So this ends up being your choice And we're trying to be flexible with our user interface. So I'll put it back here, and then I have to rearrange it. All right, so I have my new toolbar up at the top of the screen. I will select the second object. When you hover over it, it says Link Graph. This menu connects to the object menu, and the visualization element that I'm going to be using is the graph. So when I click Link Graph, I will get a crosshair cursor. If I click and drag a box, I get a box with an X through the middle of it. Right-click on it to open its properties, and we want to link a graphical object. So this is a live object that we want to connect. This is one of many places where the object has to exist to be able to use it. So just like when you read a file, you need to be able to have a file to read. Here, in order to display a chart, you need to have a chart to be able to display. The Configure Module button has moved in earlier releases. If you're using an earlier release, Configure may be down at the bottom right of this dialog box. This is to say that you can click on Configure Module and you can go into the module properties if you need to. So click OK. And now I am connected to the FFT chart. And you can see that I haven't run anything since I restarted DASYLab. If I hit Start right now, so now you can see that I've got an almost 100 hertz signal coming in. This is the same display that I saw in the worksheet view. And you can see that. I'll switch to the worksheet view. Click on the worksheet button on the function bar and restore my YT chart display. My displays have wandered onto another window. Let me bring them back. So you can see that this is the same display, but it's missing the title bar and it's missing the window frame, and it's actually missing all the colors that are associated with that. If I go back to the layout view, I just have the drawing area and then the grid, the axis labeling is drawn over the background of the screen. I'll hit stop and I'll add another object. And I would like to add the digital meter, which is displaying the actual information. Again, click Start. I have the data on my screen. Now, what can I do with this? I can go to the View menu and do full screen. And I want you to note that there's a shortcut key here, Control F. So now this display takes up my whole screen. I cannot see DASYLab anywhere on my computer except as displayed in this screen. If I hit Control F again, the display restores down and I'm back in the layout view windowed mode as opposed to Control F, the layout view full screen mode. You should also note that if you wanted to change the zoom here, we give you a bunch of zoom options depending on how you're working with this. Okay.
So just to review, we created a layout window. Right-click on the layout window to open its properties, and then orient it to the screen rather than to a piece of paper. I had to change the background color. We clicked Run to start. Control F showed the layout in full screen mode, and Control F or Escape left full screen mode. Now what I want to do is look at some layout features. I want to add texture to the objects. I want to add a border background 3D shading, and then I want to customize it. I want to add some text to the layout, and I want to add a bitmap to the layout.
If you're running Stop the Measurement, now I'm in the windowed mode of the layout. If you're not, hit Escape or Control F. So what I said I wanted to do was add some texture. I'm clicking on the YT chart object I'll right-click on it and go to Properties. In the Properties, I can display it with a frame. I can make it look sunken. The line width is configurable. In DASYLab 2020, we're not using pixels, inches, or millimeters. We're using DASYLab units. And I can add a background color. So I can change the color of the frame, and I can change the color of the background. The background is going to match currently the background of the work area. So what I'd like to do is make this pop out a little. I'm going to go to a slightly darker color and see how that looks. So I've got with frame, sunken, and a background color. So now I have a little bit of a shadow on the frame. You can see it's slightly lighter, and the intent is to give it a 3D appearance. If that's not enough for you, you can increase it. For example, if I go to 0.25 DASYLab units, now I've got a slightly deeper shadow, and it stands out about against the background better. Absolutely, with the digital meter, we need to do something the same. Open its properties, turn on frame, sunken. I'm going to leave the background color to give you an idea of what that looks like. So now I just have a slightly sunken looking display. I like that better, I think. I'll go back to the chart recorder and turn off the background color. I'm sorry, the YT chart. So now I've got slightly etched out looking displays. I would like to add some text. Now there are a couple of objects in the toolbar that use the word text. There's link text, there's text line, and there's text block. I want to add a text line, which is the A with the cursor mark. Kind of looks like a wrench, doesn't it? I'm going to select that, and I'm going to put it in the center of the screen to give this a title. Now this is an object that the height of the object determines the font height, the font size. So it's going to auto scale the font just depending on the size. Right click and go to Properties. This is a text line, so we give you a place where you can put in text. So this is the DASYLab Basics Layout page. Oh, how about layout example? I can center that in the frame, click OK, and now you can see that it is centered in its box. You can put the box anywhere you want on here. So that's not bad. I'd also like to add a bitmap. A lot of companies like to use logos on their displays, and I am no exception to that. I have on the toolbar, the next to the last button on the toolbar is a bitmap. When you click on the bitmap object, again, you get a crosshair. You draw a box. The box says file not found. Now I'm going to click somewhere else and then click on the box. So the frame of the box says file not found. I'll go to Properties, and here I have a file and a file ... button. Again, this dialog box has changed from earlier releases. What you're doing is looking for the file ... button. And I'm going to select the DASYLab logo because that's one of the bitmaps we include in the default other folder. I would like it to keep proportions because logos are intellectual property. And when you say keep proportion, when you change the size of the box that it's in, it will resize to be able to keep it proportional. So I'll have the DASYLab logo tucked over here. And so now I've decorated this. It gives you a little bit more information.
Next, I want to be able to add some actions to control the layout. I would like to set up DASYLab to automatically display this layout in full screen when I click Start, and I'd also like to do a print on demand. I'll do that by returning to the worksheet view, adding a switch and an action module, and labeling the switch buttons, and then configuring the action to be DASYLab full screen layout. So we haven't talked about actions yet. We will after this. But once you've configured it the way I'm going to show you, run it, see how it works. Don't forget you can always click Control F or Escape to leave the full screen view.
I want to return to the worksheet view. I can do that by going to the Window menu and clicking on Worksheet. And in the Worksheet view, I'm going to minimize my displays. If you recall, we had set up remembered display arrangements, and so I'm going to go to the Worksheet Only view. What I would like to do first is to create a switch module. I'll drag a switch out. The switch module is going to be used to configure DASYLab to print that layout. I'm going to make it a one-shot switch. This is a momentary switch that when you click it, it will output a pulse of TTL5 volts, a TTL high, and then it will immediately go off again. I want to label the button to be print layout. Click OK. Now I want to restore that switch. And there are a couple things I don't like about the default mode for the switch. One is that color. That red is awful. With the words print layout here, switch 0 and off end up being redundant information, and I would like to remove the redundant information. So I'll go to the module properties. The first thing to do is the options button. I'm going to turn off channel name. I'm going to turn off status text. So just to show you what that looks like, now I just have a button that says print layout. I'll go back to the button again. I want to set it up so that it always starts off, no matter the state of it. When you hit the measurement start, it will start in the off state. This will keep it from accidentally firing. The next thing I want to do is change that color. That red is bright. I think it's distracting personally, and I'm going to make the off button be a nice sedate gray. So now I have a sedate gray button. I keep clicking on that and not this. So I want to go to Module Properties. And the next thing I want to do is change the font to automatically size itself. So when you do that with DASYLab, it will configure the font to fit in the height of the box. So the height's going to determine it, just like that text object on the layout. So now I have a button that's going to say Print Layout. Now we should never see it say on except to flicker on and off. Now we need something that will do it. So I'm going to close the control group and open the special group and drag out an action module. So I want to have two actions. One is DASYLab at measurement start will display the layout in full screen mode. New in DASYLab 2020 is the monitor number, because DASYLab 2020 supports multiple monitors for the layout feature. You can specify the monitor that you want the layout to display on. Default monitor is monitor 0, the monitor that DASYLab is on. So generally, if you're working on a single monitor system, you'll leave this number at 0. The next thing I want to do is have the layout print. So I am going to click the Add Channel button at the top of the screen. I'm going to click on Channel 1. So Channel 1 is green, and it has the default settings in the settings. So now, when I click the button, I'll see a rising edge. I want DASYLab to print the layout, and there's a layout print feature, and this just has a single parameter. We have one layout, we're going to print layout 1. Click OK. Connect the action to the switch. You're going to note that the action will always have an input. So even if you're using an action like measurement start, you want to be sure that you have something connected to the action. In this case, I already anticipated that, and I added the print layout capability to the action module. I want to go back to the layout. I'm going to use the button on the toolbar, and I want to add that switch to this screen. I'll click on the link graph. This is still a link graph even though it's a switch. And I am going to put a link to the switch module. Click OK. And now I have to size it to fit. Sizing is completely your design choice. So now I have a print layout switch. At this point, I need to save this worksheet. And let's call it FFT layouts. I'll click the Start button. And now DASYLab is in full screen mode and showing you the display. And you can see, of course, that this is a live display. I'll modify the frequency that I'm looking at. So this acts just like the individual display windows and allows you to see your data. While you're working with this, you can right-click to get to the menus. They're not displayed, but they're still here. You can double-click on an axis. Now, we already had this auto-scaling, so it asks if you want to discontinue auto-scaling. Yes. So we can scale from, say, 0 to 10. You can modify the x-axis. Right now, by default, it's showing you frequency data. It's doing that because it knows the data coming into the module is frequency. So all the same features that are available to you in the worksheet view display window are available in the layout view, with the exception of being able to change the size of this display on the layout window. Now there's some features that customers like to use. One of those is survey turning on cursors. Now I've got the cursors here just as I had in the windowed mode, but I can't see any cursor data. So in order to see the cursor data, I have to go back to survey and say cursor data in layout. And DASYLab will open up a small window at the bottom. So it's keeping the same frame, making the chart a little bit smaller and adding information underneath. I can also change the survey information to show me the extended cursor display. And again, it makes the actual chart a little bit smaller, but it's showing you the information on Y0 at 6.42 and a frequency of 59 hertz. So that's matching the information that the statistics module is giving in this worksheet. So you've still got these features here. The one feature that was disabled in survey, let me turn this off. If you right click, go to survey, the zoom is grayed out. In the layout view, the only way to zoom is to hold down the control key and then click and drag to zoom in on the section of the signal that you want to look at. And you can zoom in as many steps as it needs to be able to get there until it says you can't do it. And to unzoom, you're going to control right-click once. That takes you back to the last step, and then right-click a second time, zooms all the way out. So this works the same way the zoom does in the worksheet view, except it's all keyboard control, keyboard and mouse, and not clicking on a zoom cursor on the top of the display window. So control, now click and drag. So I'm using the left mouse button to click and drag, and then control right click to unzoom. Next, what happens when I click the print layout button? I set up my computer to print to my screen capture program. So print layout is going to open up my screen capture program. I use something called Snagit, and this is the image that it makes. You're going to notice that it doesn't quite look like a piece of paper. A little bit closer than some screens I work with because I'm using a wide screen. If you have the typical more square monitor, this looks more distorted. But there are a couple things that um, printing your operator page do. First, it doesn't format to the page. Um, it includes information on the screen like the print layout button that you may not want there. And you can also see it includes the background of the layout as the background of the chart. So the next step I'd like to do is show you how to print or create and print a separate layout.
So when I add a second layout, I'm going to configure it as letter rather than screen. I'm going to copy elements from the first layout to the second one. I am going to arrange it in portrait mode rather than landscape mode. And I need to go back to the worksheet view to change the action module to print layout number 2 rather than layout 1. If you haven't noticed, if you're printing directly to your own printer queue, you may want to pause your printer queue while you get it working, especially if you're using a shared printer with other people.
I'll click Control F to restore the layout to windowed mode and click the Stop button. I want to create a second layout. Go to Window menu, New Layout. This remembers the settings from your previous layout. Right-click, go to Layout Page Setup, and I am going to transform this into US letter. I'm going to name this Report. And I am not going to give it a page color, so I want to go back to white and click OK. So I need to get this to fit in here. I'll go to the View menu, zoom to fit the entire page. It's not very convincing, was that? Zoom. I'm going to go to, say, 50%. There we go. So we can see the whole page here. I'll go back to the previous layout. Now that I have two layouts, I have drop down in the middle of the screen where the window arrangement was in the worksheet view. And in the layout view, it's a list of your layouts. Now I said I want to copy the elements of this, so I'm going to click and drag a box to select everything on this layout page. Now just to show you explicitly, I'm going to do a copy. I'll go back to the report and I'll do an explicit paste. This is just way too big. While it's still selected, I'm going to make it smaller to fit into the extent of this screen. So I'm keeping everything selected. Because it's black, I can't see where it goes on the side of the screen. So I'm just making it smaller. All right, now I'm fitting it in here, and I'm going to make it taller. It doesn't look very good, so I'm actually going to rearrange all this. So I'll click to unselect everything. I need to do a couple things. One is make my logo a little bit better and more proportional. I need to make the text line look appropriate for a sheet of paper. So I'll make it both shorter and narrower and center it up here at the top. I don't need the print layout button anymore. I'll just delete that. And now what I was thinking is that I will make the digital meter bigger and resize the chart to take up the bottom half of the screen. So this is what the report could look like. The frame with the drop shadow doesn't look quite right, so I'm going to turn off the drop shadow and just leave a straight frame. So I'm double clicking on these objects to be able to open them up. You can add any more text information that you want on here, and we'll talk some more about that. And I need to go back now to the worksheet view. This time I'm going to use the shortcut button on the function bar. I need to open the action, and action 0 is still fine. I want to display layout 1 in full screen mode on my default monitor. And then I am going to print layout 2 this time, not layout 1. Click OK. I'll save this worksheet. Click the Start button. Now I'll do the same thing. I'll print and it will open up my Snagit. And now you can see in the Snagit I have got an 8.5 by 11 sized thing. It's showing it in pixels. If we showed it in inches, it might make more sense. So we're looking at an 8.5 or an 8 by 10 and something sized piece of paper. So this will fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It's got the text information, the logo, the number, and the graph on the display. And if I zoom into this, if I go up to actual size, you can see that the numbers are still readable when you zoom into it. So it's adjusted it in order to view it in the fit to screen mode, so that you can't see the numbers very well, but the access numbers are there and can be scaled appropriately.
I think I'm going to call it a day to review what we went through. We've looked at different ways to view display modules. We looked at the window view, the worksheet view, and the layout view. We looked at changing views. We looked at arranging the displays. We looked at saving the display arrangement. And then we moved into working with layouts. I'm hoping you'll see that layouts, even if you only have DASYLab Lite or Basic, give you a pretty powerful tool to control the way your application presents to the user of the application. You can control the orientation on the screen. You can control the amount of information on the screen. In the next module, we'll talk about strings and variables. We'll use file names as strings. We'll do some advanced layouts, and we'll do an exercise of working with variables. So we're going to start covering a mishmash of topics and jumping around a little